The Green Bay Packers turned their 2023 season around doing one specific thing, and the rest of the league has not quite caught up yet. Warren Sharp from Sharp Football joins me on the show today to talk about that and a lot more.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Warren Sharp on the show today. Sharp Football is a resource I have used for a really long time. I love the work that they do over there, the projections, digging into the data on, run pass heaviness and explosive play rate and just all these cool numbers that help explain what we're seeing, explain the trends. And he's going to talk about something we actually discussed in the middle of last year, aggression. And he wrote this impassioned plea to Matt LaFleur. And he's going to talk about it, that he was frustrated. Bad teams, he's like, if bad teams are bad, I don't really care. I thought this team could be good. And they were screwing it up. And they turned it around. And they turned it around in a way that other teams have not taken notice of. And that's going to seem crazy when you hear Warren talk about it. So let's hear Warren talk about it. Joining me now from Sharp Football, I retweeted the wonderful guide that they put out every year. We had Aaron Schatz on the other day, and now Warren Sharp here. Between those two guides, you are ready to get the NFL season started if you get yourself both of those guides. Warren, great to be with you. You are someone who you pour over everything in the offseason, and you and your team do a great job of getting the information in front of us that we need. Was there something you were trying to look at this offseason? I feel like you're always introducing new stuff. Like a couple years ago was rest advantage. Was there something that caught your eye? Like, hey, I want to look at this a little bit more this offseason.
Well, one thing, I didn't even put it in the book. And first of all, Peter, thanks for having me on board. I was super pumped about the Packers down the stretch last year. I know we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I was definitely on that bandwagon. I was excited about Jordan Love. And I think it's an exciting year upcoming. As relates to the guide real quick, if you enter the code Packers, you get 50% off the book. So I'm giving you guys 50% off the book.
Awesome. Thank you.
Drops the price down to just over $15. And I think you're going to find it's well worth that money. And if it's not, and if you think this book is terrible, it's not worth $15, find me on Twitter. I'm easy to find, and I'll give you a full refund. I don't care. I think it's going to be well worth your money. But and you can get it over at sharp.football. But as it relates to this offseason, one of the things that I was studying, you guys didn't have this problem as much as other teams did because you had an aggressive downfield passing attack with Jordan Love. But what I was uncovering, especially with the way that modern defenses are playing, the way that they're sitting back, they're encouraging underneath passing. They're trying to prevent the bigger splash plays down the field with the two deep safeties. And offensive coordinators are buying into that more and more and more. We are seeing by the year a higher rate of passes that are thrown behind the line of scrimmage. And I went in and looked at, are these passes actually efficient? Are they effective when you're throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage? And to a man across the NFL, all 32 teams, when those teams throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, when their target ADOT is behind the line of scrimmage, every single team has negative EPA per attempt. But when they throw the ball beyond the line of scrimmage, even if it's 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage, only 3 teams have negative EPA per attempt, and 29 teams have positive EPA per attempt. So it's even the best offenses in the NFL don't have success throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage. And trust me, I looked, maybe your first question would be, well, what about, those dump off passes? What if you remove those? What if you try to take away some of the really long delayed stuff where it's kind of like the relief valve that you're throwing into a running back. Those might not have as much success. But what about you look at the ones that are passed between like 1 and 2 seconds, those quick ones, those design plays, even those do not have that efficiency. Those defenses, yes, they drop back, but it's easy to rally up to that point of attack. So my advice to offensive coordinators this season is try to reduce as much as possible your reliance on these short passes. It is not an extension of the run game. These passes are no longer as effective as they were 5-10 years ago. Their efficiency has dropped. You need to try to test these defenses and push the ball down the field. Try to get those splash plays like you guys were doing last season. But even if you're not getting those splash plays, you just can't have your quarterback dumping the ball off behind the line of scrimmage and expect that that's going to be an efficient way to move the football down the field. In fact, oftentimes a run play to your running back, which I do not advocate a lot of those, as you well know, those end up having more efficiency than these behind the line of scrimmage passes.
I believe that.
And but the even better option would be if you don't have the routes, you have a pass route where it's a couple designed down the field, and then you've got your guy down behind the line of scrimmage who is like your third option, your second option, and they take away that first option down the field. I will tell you, a quarterback scramble when there's an open run lane is going to deliver much higher upside than one of these passes behind the line of scrimmage. And so that needs to be coached to these quarterbacks as well. We are no longer in an era, in my opinion, where we are trying to teach quarterbacks to stay in the pocket and get through all your progressions. And you have to do this, and this is the way that you quarterback in the NFL. The way that you win in the NFL is to gain yards. And the way that you gain yards oftentimes is by having a quarterback use his legs, get down when he needs to, but use those legs and try to pick up yardage. And the best and most efficient play in the NFL is a design pass play where a quarterback keeps the ball and sees an open run lane in that defensive line and scrambles through it. That play has more upside and a higher base rate efficiency than any other single play in NFL. So Jordan Love does that a fair amount. More quarterbacks need to do that. But these behind the line of scrimmage passes, Peter, they need to go by the wayside. On occasion, fine. But we're seeing the rates of usage just being ratcheted up, and that needs to decrease this year.
What you're telling me is music to my ears, because I have been screaming about these RPO screens that the Packers like to run when it's like either we can hand it off or it's a receiver screen to the outside, and I swear it never works on the outside. I mean, I know it does, but what you're telling me is those plays have negative value, and I think teams need to find new options there. I think that's a fascinating observation. You mentioned the explosive play rate. This was something that you wrote about in the section on the Packers. Their offense last year took off when they were able to generate explosive plays early. Their early offense became the best in the league. They went from 32nd in explosive play rate in the first half of games to number 3 weeks 9 through the end of the season. And they were first in success rate. This is your point about trying to create these explosive plays. When the Packers started doing it, it's not, hey, let's go 10, 12 plays, 80 yards. It's let's go 4 plays, 80 yards, even if we go 3 and out trying to do it.
Yeah, these explosive plays erase negative plays, right? They're negative play erasers, and it is very hard against the style of defense that is around the NFL to matriculate the ball down the field with these consistent, efficient 4-yard, 6-yard, air yard passes that are just like moving the ball down the field and expecting to have success. When you look at teams like the Miami Dolphins, you look at teams like the San Francisco 49ers, these are some of the Shanahan offensive teams. Even I will say this, look at a team like the Atlanta Falcons, which has had terrible quarterback play. And I know Arthur Smith gets like a bad rap, and you could say what you want about him. But the way that a lot of these teams are establishing a little bit of a run, which I don't think is necessary to open up play action, but you get the defense to play run on some of these early downs, and then all of a sudden on a second down, instead of running on 2nd and 3, you've got a play action and you're attacking down the field, or at times 1st and 10 when they're really expecting a run, you can attack down the field. There was an absolute switch that was turned by the Green Bay Packers. I'm convinced after they were sitting there at 2-5. And I wrote passionately about this during the season last year, because I go through every single team and I'm analyzing things. And I did not think, like, what made me most upset about any team If you have a bad team and you have a coach that just doesn't get it and you're not efficient, I'll probably say something about it, right? I'm gonna call it out, but I'm not gonna get mad about it because like what else are we gonna expect here, right?
Right.
But when it was the Green Bay Packers last year, I actually got frustrated and mad and angry about it and wrote with a lot more passion about it because I knew that it could be solved. There wasn't that much difficulty that needed to occur. You could have just changed up the emphasis. Your players were fine. Your coaches are good. You just needed a different emphasis in terms of how to attack. Stop trying to set things up for later in the game. Stop trying to play to keep things close. Stop trying to keep Jordan Love safe. Let's be aggressive. Let's try to jump out to the lead. Let's make the other team play off their back foot. Let's make the other team try to figure out ways that they can, well, let's set this up and we'll use this in the third quarter and really catch them. Okay, great. You're down by 13 points. Go ahead and try it in the third quarter, right?
Right.
That's what the Packers needed to do. And that lack of explosiveness absolutely was one of the biggest factors in terms of them being able to vault their offense to higher production. And I think I went in here, I'm looking through the chapter that I wrote here. As a result, they averaged just 4.5 first half points, which was dead last in the NFL, and trailed by nearly 1 touchdown at halftime on average through the first 9 weeks. And once they started to get more aggressive and more explosive with what they were doing early from a game scripting perspective and from a decision to attack further down the field, they moved to averaging 14.8 first half points, which was 6th best in the NFL. Think about that. 4.5 to 14.8. We're talking about over 10 more points per half in the first half being scored. They led by far more points, and it was a lot easier to close out these games versus their opponents. So this is what I wish all teams would do, and that's why I just heap praise on LaFleur. Like I wrote at length about it. Hopefully maybe somebody there read it, got some ideas, but even if they just came up with this on their own and it just so happened the timing was the same, that's great. Great on the coaching staff for implementing the most efficient means of winning games possible. And that is to get a quick lead and to play with your, not have to play on your toes and have to worry about everything late in the game, but to play a lot more confidently late in the game and being able to have the entire playbook open to you. I'll give a great example of a very, I don't say they're your biggest rival, but they're who you're going to play week 1 down in Brazil, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Philadelphia Eagles, think about this team, night and day different. 2022, they're playing with their hair on fire to start these games. They're ending up building leads, and they're up so many points that they end up being able to just run the ball late in games, and all they're doing is running the ball. They're not accumulating passing stats. They're running the ball. They're resting their quarterback. They're resting their offense, and they go to the Super Bowl that year. Last year, although they started out 10-1 last season, identical to what they started out in 2022, it was night and day different. They were only winning those games thanks to late comebacks. They were having to play all 4 quarters as hard as they could. And ultimately, things caught up with them and the wheels fell off late in the season. Now this whole expose was written about Philadelphia Eagles and their coaching staff and blah, 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 and the quarterback.
Yeah, the infighting and the
infighting,
backstabbing.
Exactly. So I absolutely think that if you guys can start week 1 playing aggressive like you did the way that you ended the season, you're going to have a lot easier start. And nobody likes playing. You don't like working. I don't like working when I'm nervous, when I'm rushed, when there's deadlines. And that's what it's like to coach and to play when you're trailing in the second half of these games. And everybody who's out there on the field or as a coach, these are people. They have emotions. They have stress factors. It's far better to coach aggressively early and then allow things to come to you a little bit more naturally and be a little bit more calm. Your brain is functioning better. You're calling better plays when you're playing with a lead late in games. So there's a psychological aspect to this as well as just a physical one in terms of being able to win these games. So I hope that they start week 1 out the gates just like they finished last season.
Back for more with Warren Sharp here in just a second on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, I love this point. You had a stat in there. The Packers went from 28th in EPA per play on scripted plays to first in EPA per play in the second half. I mean, talk about flipping the script on your season in a literal and metaphorical way. I mean, that's the actual script, right? I mean, it doesn't get any more stark than that. It's interesting too, because this is a defensive change too. The exact same change you're talking about. Be aggressive, bring the fight to the opponent. That's what Jeff Hafley is in Green Bay to do, to effort that change. And let me step big picture here for a second, Warren, because I know that you are like awash in data and all that stuff, but to hear you talk about it, it seems like you also believe in this idea of mentality and aggressiveness and those sorts of things. How do you balance those things? Because a lot of times you hear from the data-driven people, they're not thinking about momentum or attitude. They just don't discuss those kinds of things. Like, how do you incorporate that into your analysis?
Yeah, well, because I see a direct correlation, A to B. Like, I see it in the data that when you have leads at halftime, you are far more likely to win games.
Yeah, well,
you are
when you're winning in a game, it turns out you win more of those games.
Right. Well, right. Exactly. And it's harder for even like the better teams to come back in games than it is for them to just start fast in a game and then coast late. There's a lot of data that suggests some of the things that I end up relying on when I'm talking to some coaches. Like pretty much every single coach, whether it's an OC, doesn't work quite as well as much as it does when I talk to like a general manager or a head coach. I have suggested the military style stress training that they can take, the courses, the clinics that they can take in the off season with their entire staff, of how to be able to calm your mind and get focused in these really high stress situations, which is not as different. Obviously, we're not going to equate like war to football, but like on a battlefield, you have to make quick decisions. And there it's life and death. And the NFL is winning games or losing games. But it is very stressful as a play caller to make those. Like, it's easy for us, and I've been doing this for a while now. It's easy to like say, oh, that was a bad play. Why would you do this? Like, those types of things are easy sitting here. But when you're out there, it does become more difficult. There's a lot more stress that's involved. And so I just know from talking to some of these guys and trying to set expectations about like what I can do to help them or what they should do to help themselves from like a professional level in terms of like moving from quarterbacks coach to OC, from OC to head coach, like what they can be doing to help their careers. And these are some of the things that I recommend at times. So I believe, I guess you could call it like a holistic approach, but there's a lot of data that I dig through and parse through every single day, off season, in season. But also I'm trying to approach this as I do for certain teams, set up game plans, set up strategies for play calling and emphasis of how to attack this particular opponent each week. It's the statistics and the matchups and the injuries are dictating the vast majority of it. But a lot of it is you have to zoom out and understand some of the focus of this game and some of the other stress factors that might be occurring in this game if you don't do it in this particular way, and how you can make those adjustments. And there are some coaches that are really good at making those adjustments, and then there are other coaches that are really poor at making those adjustments. So I try to look at everything. To be honest, like there is. I mean,
Greg Cosell has this great line that's like, if it doesn't manifest on the field, it doesn't matter. And I think it's the same way with data. It's like if at like attitude there's the attitude reflects leadership, but your attitude of how you play is going to manifest itself in how you produce. And so if you are aggressive, trying to create explosives, chances are you're going to create explosives, and that will be manifest in the data. Also, you mentioned earlier that we don't like to work under stress or under deadlines. I'm a sicko, and so I actually kind of do enjoy that. Maybe sometimes you do too, when you're like trying to get something done, and there's that stress and pressure of just like, oh, I got to get this done. There's something a little, stimulating about that.
If you feel like you're on the right track, if you know you've got a lot to do, but you've got a great plan and you've succeeded in hitting like the first couple of steps of it, and so you feel like you can do it, but it's hard. That's fine. It's when you're behind the ball and you're really fighting uphill and you don't think you're going to get there and you're going to miss it. Like that's when it becomes much more problematic.
So from a year ago, and I know it's hard to put yourself in that position, but I want to ask you about two people in particular, because I think they will determine the Packers' outcome just as they determine most teams' outcomes, the quarterback and the coach. How has your assessment of Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur changed in the last year after seeing this version of the Packers?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. Look, I wrote last year that I thought it was great the way that they were entering their tenure together, because there really wasn't a whole lot of stress on them.
Right.
Like Aaron Rodgers didn't have a very good first season. Like it might be expected. The team was like a 6.5 win projection for last year, something along those lines. Like they weren't expected to be great. They could absolutely come in here and just be ho-hum, and nobody would care that much. We got a long career ahead of Jordan Love. He just can't flop. And so I thought it was great that they were able to execute with very low expectations. But once that season hit, once they hit that 2-5 mark, and there needed to be changes, and it needed to come from the play calling and then on the field from an execution perspective, it just gave me so much hope for the future, I guess is a great way to say it, that they were able to coach, make those adjustments, quarterback execute those adjustments. He took that leadership, he took that onto his shoulders, and I just feel like they're in a very good position moving forward. As you said, those are the two most important things. And oftentimes we like to just say, quarterback wins or quarterback passing stats, or these are his yards, but he's only earning those passing yards or his passing touchdowns versus rushing touchdowns, etc., because of the plays that are coming in from his coach.
Right.
And so it's very hard to de-link the play caller. I'll not say the head coach, because not all head coaches call plays, but the play caller from the quarterback is very hard to separate the two and say, well, this is all the quarterback, because as much as we say everything's Patrick Mahomes, like we can't forget that this is the way that Andy Reid's calling this offense. That if it's Patrick Mahomes working with Adam Gase, for example, it's not going to look like this at all. Right. So we have to acknowledge that these two are really close symbiotic relationship. And I think I'm excited about the future. I am really hopeful and excited about the future based upon what I saw last year. It is such, as you know, preaching to the choir here, such a young team, a very young offensive line, a very young receiving core, the young skill group, young backfield. This is such a young, optimistic team. And that's where a quarterback could come in and really help lead them. And for him to take that on his shoulders and be able to do that, I just thought it was fabulous. And so that's why I like watching good football, right? And I don't root for a particular team in general, but I found myself pulling for the Packers to go into Dallas. And when they were putting up those points, it didn't hurt that I was winning some bets along the way. But like I was pulling for them to have that success in Dallas and put up those points and just watch the show, because it makes you feel good about the future of the NFL. And we all love watching this sport and analyzing this sport and seeing a great team with a great quarterback with an offense that understands how to attack properly. This just makes me feel really good.
Yeah. Still more to come with Warren Sharp here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's the whole point. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs, it's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to, the perfect role. In a given month, Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities or big work projects or both and a lot more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. That's why it helps to have self-care non-negotiables. Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy. Even when we know what makes us happy, it can be hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables are more important than ever. Whether therapy is a non-negotiable or you can use therapy to help you figure out what can be a non-negotiable for you so that you have the self-care that you need. BetterHelp is there to give it to you. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy or leg day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the description so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Yeah, the state of the sport is always predicated on how many good coaches there are and how many good quarterbacks there are. Like, that is the quality of the play that we see is always predicated on those two things. All right, Warren, I'm going to let you go on this. Your best Packers bet going into this season.
Wow. So the one thing that I like about the Green Bay Packers this year is the simple fact that they don't have very many rest disadvantages on the schedule.
Yeah, we talked about this.
For that reason, I think, look, I am not betting on the Packers in the division because I actually do think that the Detroit Lions, though they look terrible in the secondary, and maybe, the mark of
rookies are bad, Warren.
The mark of somebody who is really caring about the results is being able to change their opinion at certain points in time. Right now, my opinion is that the Detroit Lions secondary is going to be vastly improved over last year. And I did some analysis, and what I found is that the Detroit Lions, when they blitzed last year, their pass defense was the worst in the NFL. But when they did not blitz last year, they were a top 10. They were like 8th or 9th in EPA per pass attempt allowed and completion rate allowed. They just needed to not blitz as much. Their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, got way too blitz happy trying to get pressure. They didn't
That's
need
what he
to
wants
do
to
it.
do. That's the thing.
I know that's what he wants to do, but he needs to dial that back. They ranked 5th best in pressure rate when they did not blitz. So they did not need those extra rushers to get to the quarterback. They were one of the best teams at getting pressure without those blitzers. They need to, and they improved their secondary from a personnel's perspective. I know they just lost a projected starter, I think, for this season. I think if their secondary is better, I have a lot of confidence in their offense as well. They maintained their offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, which is a big deal. It's like being able to retain Steve Spagnuolo for the Kansas City Chiefs defense, like something that should not probably happen. He should be getting a promotion elsewhere, but they were able to keep him around. For those reasons, I think the Lions are in a good position. They play 14 to 17 games indoors, which we know Jared Goff really struggles playing outside, especially in the elements. These things should be able to help the Detroit Lions rack up some more wins. And so for that reason, I see them winning the division. I do see the Green Bay Packers, though, surprising teams from an efficiency perspective. And here's what I will tell you right now. I don't have any present bets, nor am I on the short list of getting ready to place any bets on the Green Bay Packers. But one thing that I'm going to be doing closely is watching how they start these games again. And I will be looking to bet, and this is something that you can bet on, first half team totals for the Green Bay Packers. They'll be lined at like 10.5 points, 11.5 points, 12.5 points in a lot of their games from a first half team total perspective. And I think that this is an offense that can absolutely be putting up 13, 14, 16, 17 points in the first half of games. And they're going to be able to exceed a lot of those first half team totals. And I also want to see how they do from a special teams perspective at handling this new kickoff rule. What is your, if you can give me a quick report, like how positive do you think, what's the coaching staff been saying, maybe special teams coordinator? I know they're not tipping their hand, but do you guys think you have a really good plan with what you're going to do on these?
Listen, I said this after watching, I know it's just one game, but I went back and specifically watched the Hall of Fame game for this. I think Keyshawn Nixon is going to excel under this new paradigm, because I think it's about vision and acceleration, and that's why you're going to see more running backs back there. It's why you're going to see some different looks back there, because I think it just favors him. You break one or two tackles, or you've hit the right crease, you can just be gone. And if you go back and look at the big plays that Keyshawn Nixon had, that's what it was. It wasn't like, the seas parted. It was, he made the right cut and the right movement. He anticipated the way things were going to happen, and that's how they broke. He kind of has vision like a running back. So I think this has a chance to be good for them. Now, with the Packers history, they're going to give up like 3 return touchdowns this year too, just because that's how the way the Packers special teams has worked for 20 years. But no, I think it's pretty good for this offense for the return game for Green Bay.
Yeah, setting up better field position. I wrote about Nixon, I want to say midseason last year, or it was late the year before. I honestly can't remember. About once he started taking more of the workload on those returns, how much better average starting field position you guys had, and what difference it made for the offense. And so I think that is going to be a factor. Also, your defense. I'm excited about your defensive coordinator and what he's going to do on that side of the ball. Maybe that can help set up some slightly better field position for your offense to score points early in games. And so these are reasons why I'm excited and optimistic that you can start off quickly in some of these games. And so you look at that start of the season, you've got from weeks 1, tough game in Brazil. But after that, you've got the Colts, the Titans, the Vikings, the Rams, and the Cardinals. All of these teams are expected to be 8.5 or fewer wins on the season. You don't start playing some of your more difficult opponents till later. This is where I will assure you, week 2, week 3, I'll be on some of their first half team total overs, and hopefully you and I can cash those tickets together.
It sounds great. I will probably have it in week 1, to be honest with you, because I'm already on the Packers in week 1. I think the Eagles are overvalued this year. I think that defense was a disaster, dumpster tire fire last year, and I don't know that it's going to get materially better this year. We'll see. Warren, appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks for having me, Peter. Great to have Warren on the show. Appreciate him joining us. Like I said, they do great work over there. Go pick up the preview book that they have, PDF. It's easy. You can just scroll through and find the Packers stuff. They have a lot of great stuff in there, so go check it out and you get the discount. Use the code Packers. $15. Come on, that is just a couple. That's lunch. Less than lunch might cost. So easy option over there. Back tomorrow. After the game, we will be live on our Locked On Packers YouTube page, bonus podcast in your feed. Boom shakalaka. And very timely reference from your boy. And then we'll be back next week normally. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Check us out on YouTube tomorrow, where we will be live. And all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Locked On Packers, so you can stay Locked On Packers.